The billionaire CEO looked at the single dad as if he had lost his mind. The check in her hand could have covered 3 months of his mortgage payments, replaced the transmission in his aging pickup truck, and wiped out the utility bill sitting unopened on his kitchen counter. Yet Ethan Walker simply smiled, folded the check, and handed it back. "The repair took 22 minutes, he said quietly. "Charging you thousands wouldn't be honest." The laughter came from two men standing near the service bay. One shook his head. The other muttered that nobody turned down money like that anymore. But Ethan didn't defend himself. He never did. He returned to wiping grease from his hands while the red Ferrari gleamed beneath the afternoon sunlight. What nobody in that garage knew was that a secret hidden inside that car was about to connect two wounded lives in a way neither could imagine. The summer air shimmered above Main Street in the small Ohio town. Across from Walker Auto Repair, the local diner buzzed with the familiar rhythm of coffee refills, pie orders, and farmers escaping the heat. Ethan glanced at the wall clock. In less than an hour, he needed to pick up his 12-year-old daughter, Lily, from band practice at the middle school. No matter how busy work became, he never missed pickup time. That promise mattered. The garage itself was modest. Faded signs, concrete floors stained by years of honest labor. A coffee maker older than some of the customers. Ethan preferred it that way. He had spent 14 years building a reputation based not on advertisements, but on trust. "You could have charged 10 grand, his younger mechanic Mike whispered. "She owns half the tech world." Ethan chuckled softly. A loose electrical connection doesn't suddenly become worth 10 grand because it's attached to a Ferrari. Mike stared at him. "You really believe that?" "I really do." Outside, a grocery store delivery truck rolled through the intersection while a mail carrier moved from mailbox to mailbox beneath the bright sky. Ordinary people were living ordinary lives. Ethan respected that, maybe because he was one of them. The Ferrari had arrived that morning on a flatbed truck. The paperwork listed the owner as Charlotte Bennett, founder and CEO of Bennett Technologies. Ethan recognized the name. Her face appeared in business magazines, stacked in hospital waiting rooms and airport lounges across the country. But fame meant little to him. Cars broke. People needed help. Those facts remained the same regardless of bank accounts. The repair itself had been simple. Behind a custom interior panel, a connector had worked loose. 22 minutes later, the vehicle ran perfectly. End of story. Or so he thought. At precisely 4:30, a black SUV entered the parking lot. The vehicle looked expensive enough to buy every building on the block. A woman stepped out. Elegant, confident, composed. Charlotte Bennett carried herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to making billion-dollar decisions. Yet when she approached the garage, Ethan noticed something unexpected. She looked tired, not physically, emotionally. The kind of tiredness that settles behind the eyes after years of carrying unanswered questions. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. "That's me. I am Charlotte Bennett. Pleasure to meet you." She looked toward the Ferrari. "My assistant told me you repaired it." "Yes, ma'am," and refused payment. Ethan shrugged. The repair wasn't complicated. Charlotte stared at him. "Most people don't refuse money. Most people have their reasons." "You mean?" For a moment, silence settled between them. Somewhere in the distance, church bells echoed from a small chapel beyond the church parking lot. The sound seemed to soften something inside her expression. Then her attention drifted toward a framed photograph sitting on Ethan's toolbox. A smiling girl holding a trumpet. "Your daughter?" she asked. Ethan's face brightened immediately. "Lily, you're proud of her." "Every day." Charlotte nodded slowly. A shadow crossed her eyes. Before Ethan could ask why, she turned toward the Ferrari and froze. Deep inside a partially exposed rear compartment, sunlight reflected off something metallic hidden behind the upholstery. Her breathing caught. "No," she whispered. "That can't be." Ethan stepped closer. "What is it?" Charlotte didn't answer immediately. Her eyes filled with disbelief. "My father owned this Ferrari before me," she finally said. "A week before he died, he told me there was something hidden inside it. Something important. We searched for years and never found anything." Her hand trembled as she reached toward the compartment. Whatever was hidden there had remained untouched for 2 decades. and judging by the fear and hope battling across her face, opening it might reveal a truth she had spent 20 years trying to find. Charlotte remained standing beside the Ferrari long after Ethan's pickup truck disappeared down Main Street. The late afternoon sun painted warm streaks across the garage floor, but she barely noticed. Her attention stayed fixed on the letter in her hands. The handwriting belonged to her father. There was no doubt about that. For 20 years, she had searched for pieces of him in business records, old photographs, and fading memories. Now, for the first time, she held words he had written specifically for her. Yet instead of answers, the letter offered another mystery. Trust the man whose family once saved mine. Charlotte read the sentence again. Ethan Walker was younger than she expected. Humble, quiet, ordinary in every visible way. Nothing about him suggested he was connected to one of the most important unfinished chapters of her father's life. And yet her father had written his name. Across the street, customers drifted in and out of the diner carrying paper bags and styrofoam coffee cups. A delivery van stopped briefly beside the grocery store before continuing down the road. The town moved at a pace completely different from the world Charlotte normally occupied. Strangely, she found herself appreciating it. She stepped into Ethan's office to escape the heat. The room was simple. A worn desk, an old filing cabinet, family photographs arranged without concern for perfection. One picture showed Ethan and Lily smiling beside an aging pickup truck decorated with Christmas lights. Another showed Lily holding a trumpet outside what looked like a school auditorium. Charlotte studied each image. They revealed something rare. Stability, not wealth, not success, just devotion. On the corner of the desk sat a small stack of envelopes. Utility bills, school forms, ordinary responsibilities. The sight stirred an unfamiliar feeling inside her. Respect mixed with guilt. She had arrived expecting another mechanic eager to profit from her reputation. Instead, she had met a man who refused easy money because it conflicted with his values. The realization unsettled her more than she expected. 30 minutes later, Ethan returned with Lily. Charlotte watched through the office window as the girl climbed from the pickup truck carrying her trumpet case. The school hallway must have emptied only moments earlier. Ethan listened attentively while Lily spoke about practice. He never looked at his phone, never appeared distracted. He simply listened. That simple act struck Charlotte harder than any executive speech she had heard in years. Her father used to listen that way. The thought tightened her throat. As Ethan and Lily entered the garage, Charlotte folded the letter carefully. Lily offered a polite smile. Ethan immediately noticed the change in Charlotte's expression. "Did you learn something?" he asked. Charlotte nodded. "Maybe." She hesitated. Then she held up the letter. "My father knew your family." Ethan blinked. Genuine surprise crossed his face. "My family. Your name was written here." For the first time all afternoon, uncertainty appeared in Ethan's eyes. He slowly removed an old photograph from his wallet. The edges were worn from years of use. "Would this man happen to be your father?" he asked. Charlotte looked down at the picture and felt her breath catch. Standing beside Ethan's father was a much younger version of her own father, smiling in front of a small white church. And written on the back of the photograph was a date that raised even more questions than the letter itself. The next morning arrived with the kind of clear Ohio sky that made everything feel possible. Charlotte stood beside the Ferrari holding Lily's handwritten note. "Hope tastes better when you share it." She had negotiated billion-dollar acquisitions, spoken before thousands of shareholders, and appeared on magazine covers across the country. Yet a simple cookie and a few handwritten words from a 12-year-old girl affected her more than most corporate awards ever had. Ethan emerged from the garage, carrying a travel mug of coffee and the photograph. "The church secretary called me back," he said. "There is an elderly volunteer there named Walter Green. He remembers both our fathers." Charlotte felt a surge of anticipation immediately followed by anxiety. Every new clue seemed to create two new questions. "Do you think he knows what my father was trying to tell me?" Ethan considered the question carefully. "I think he knows something. Whether it is the answer, we will find out." An hour later, they drove together in Ethan's pickup truck while Lily sat between them. The Ferrari remained at the garage. The church sat nearly 15 miles outside town along a quiet county road lined with cornfields and old farmhouses. As they traveled, Charlotte noticed how different the world looked from the passenger seat of a work truck. No assistants, no conference calls, no carefully managed schedules, just open road and conversation. They stopped briefly at a small grocery store for bottled water. Ethan quietly paid for everyone's drinks before Charlotte could reach for her wallet. It was not about money. It was simply his habit to take care of people around him. The gesture stayed with her long after they returned to the road. When they finally arrived, the white church looked remarkably similar to the one in the photograph. The church parking lot contained only a handful of vehicles. A faded American flag moved gently in the breeze. Charlotte's pulse quickened as they stepped inside. Walter Green waited near the fellowship hall. He appeared well into his 70s, but his eyes remained sharp. The moment he saw the photograph, recognition filled his face. "Robert Walker," he said, pointing at Ethan's father. Then he touched the image of Charlotte's father. "And Daniel Bennett. Good men. Both of them." Relief swept across Charlotte. At last, someone remembered. Yet the relief lasted only a moment. Walter's expression slowly became more serious. "Your fathers were working on something together during Daniel's final year," he said. "Something important." Charlotte leaned forward. "What was it?" Walter hesitated. The pause itself felt like a warning. "I promised I would never discuss it unless one of you came looking." He looked directly at Charlotte. "And if I tell you the truth, it may change everything you believe about your father's legacy." The room fell silent. Even Ethan seemed surprised by the weight of those words. Then Walter reached into an old cabinet and removed a worn leather journal. The moment Charlotte saw her father's initials embossed on the cover, she realized the next answer had been waiting here all along. Charlotte read the note twice before handing it to Ethan. "Bring Ethan Walker with you." The words seemed impossible. Her father had written them more than 20 years ago, long before either of them could have imagined standing together in a small Ohio garage. Ethan stared at the paper in silence. He was not a man easily shaken, but this was different. Somehow, Daniel Bennett had anticipated that his daughter and Robert Walker's son would one day follow the same trail. "I do not understand," Charlotte admitted. "Neither do I," Ethan replied honestly. Yet despite the confusion, something important had changed. The mystery no longer belonged only to Charlotte. It belonged to both of them. Outside, the evening crowd gathered at the diner across Main Street. Pickup trucks filled the parking spaces while neon lights flickered to life in the windows. The town settled into its familiar routine, but neither of them felt connected to ordinary life anymore. They spent another hour studying the map and the newly discovered note. The location marked by Daniel Bennett sat near an abandoned section of county land. According to online records, the property had not changed ownership in decades. No businesses operated there. No recent permits existed. It was as though the place had been forgotten. Yet someone had clearly intended for them to find it. Then reality interrupted. Charlotte's phone rang again. Her assistant. 3 missed calls had already accumulated. A board meeting awaited her in Chicago the next morning. Investors were expecting updates on a major acquisition. Walking away, even temporarily, would create consequences. Ethan saw the tension in her face. "You should take the call," he said gently. Charlotte looked down at the screen before silencing it. "For once, I think this matters more." The answer surprised even her. For years, she had chosen work first. Always work. Her father's journal had forced her to confront what those choices could cost. A quiet understanding passed between them. Ethan did not praise her decision. He simply respected it. Later that evening, Ethan drove Lily home. The old pickup truck rumbled along familiar streets lined with mailboxes and front porches glowing beneath porch lights. At home, he helped Lily with a science assignment while dinner warmed in the oven. Charlotte noticed something remarkable. Even with a mystery unfolding around him, Ethan never neglected the responsibilities directly in front of him. He called a customer about a repair. He reviewed tomorrow's work schedule. He checked that Lily had packed everything she needed. Character revealed itself in small moments. Charlotte was beginning to see that. The next morning, she arrived at the garage before sunrise. Ethan was already there, organizing tools, and preparing repair orders. He believed in leaving things better than he found them. Before they could discuss the trip, a familiar voice called from the entrance. Walter Green stood in the doorway, holding a sealed envelope. "Almost forgot," he said. "Daniel told me to give you this only after you found the second note." Charlotte's heart immediately accelerated. Another message. Another piece of the puzzle. Walter handed over the envelope and quietly added, "This one explains why Ethan was always meant to be part of the journey." As Charlotte carefully broke the seal, neither she nor Ethan realized that the answer inside would transform everything they believed about their fathers. Charlotte stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. The barn had already revealed more about her father than 20 years of corporate archives ever had. Yet something about the words on the front felt different. Personal. Intentional. "To my daughter, if Ethan agrees." Not if you find this. Not if you follow the clues. If Ethan agrees. The condition made no sense. Slowly, she unfolded the letter inside. Ethan stood near the open barn door, giving her privacy. The afternoon breeze moved through the weathered wood while Lily organized old photographs nearby. Charlotte began reading. "If you're holding this letter, then Robert's son chose to help you. That matters more than you realize. For years, I worried that success would teach my daughter to trust power more than character. If Ethan is standing beside you now, then you've already found what I hoped you would find." Charlotte felt her throat tighten. She glanced toward Ethan. He was sitting beside Lily, studying an old photograph. Father and daughter laughed quietly together. Daniel's words continued. "There will come a moment when you can use influence, money, or authority to force an outcome. Do not let Ethan guide the next decision. Trust the values his father taught him." The instruction felt almost impossible. Charlotte had spent her entire adult life solving problems through action. Yet her father was asking her to trust someone else. As she lowered the letter, her eyes drifted back toward Ethan and Lily. There was nothing extraordinary about the scene. No wealth, no status, just a father giving his full attention to his daughter. "You never seem to be in a hurry," Charlotte said quietly. Ethan looked up. "Depend on what matters. Most people spend their lives chasing bigger opportunities." Ethan smiled faintly. "Lily won't remember how many opportunities one chased. She'll remember whether I showed up." For the first time, Charlotte understood something her father had been trying to teach her. Success and significance were not always the same thing. Back at the workbench, Ethan discovered another folder beneath the foundation paperwork. Inside were applications from struggling single parents written more than 2 decades earlier. Housing assistance, childcare needs, families who had hoped for help that never arrived. Ethan turned the pages slowly. "These people were never helped," he said quietly. Many applications carried notes from Daniel and Robert promising support. None had been fulfilled. Ethan closed the folder carefully. They trusted someone to come back. Charlotte expected frustration. Instead, she watched him place every document back into order with care and respect. Even after 20 years, he treated the stories of strangers with dignity. Her trust deepened. As they packed the records for preservation, Ethan uncovered a sealed legal document dated 1 week before Daniel Bennett's death. Charlotte immediately recognized her father's signature. But what caught both of their attention was the final line. The document named only 2 people responsible for deciding the future of the foundation: Charlotte Bennett and Ethan Walker. Suddenly, the mystery was no longer about understanding the past. It was about a choice that could change the future. The discovery in the barn followed them back to town, like an unanswered question. Long after the boxes were unloaded into Ethan's office, Charlotte found herself staring at the legal document that named only 2 trustees: her and Ethan. The responsibility felt heavier than any board decision she had ever made. Outside the garage, Main Street moved through another ordinary afternoon. Customers crossed the sidewalk carrying bags from the grocery store. A mail carrier stopped at a row of mailboxes. Across the street, the diner served its lunch crowd. Yet inside the office, the future of an unfinished promise rested on a desk surrounded by repair invoices and family photographs. Ethan carefully organized the foundation documents into labeled folders. He handled each application with the same respect he gave a customer's vehicle. One file described a widowed father struggling to keep custody of his children after losing reliable transportation. Another came from a single mother working 2 jobs while sleeping on a relative's couch. Charlotte watched Ethan read every page. He never rushed, never treated the stories like paperwork. "These people trusted someone to care," he said quietly. "That matters." Charlotte noticed something she had not expected. He spoke about strangers the same way he spoke about Lily. With patience, with dignity, with responsibility. It was another reminder of why her father had trusted him. Later that evening, Ethan drove Lily to a school orientation event. The school hallway buzzed with students collecting schedules and meeting teachers for the upcoming year. Charlotte had offered to continue sorting documents alone, but Ethan insisted on keeping his commitment to Lily first. "The papers will still be there in an hour," he said. "My daughter will not get this evening back." The comment stayed with Charlotte after he left. Her father had written often about regret, about time lost. Watching Ethan choose family over urgency felt like witnessing the lesson Daniel Bennett had spent years trying to learn. When Ethan returned, he carried milkshakes from the diner. One for Lily, one for Charlotte, one for himself. No speech, no ceremony. Just kindness. As they continued reviewing records, a new discovery emerged. Tucked inside a folder of Foundation correspondence was a list of families originally approved for assistance. Several names had notes beside them. Follow-up, emergency housing, medical transportation. One note caught Charlotte's attention immediately. The family had received help from Robert Walker personally after funding delays threatened the application. Ethan recognized the last name. His father had mentioned him years ago. Suddenly the foundation was no longer an idea. It had already begun changing lives before Daniel's death stopped everything. Then came the obstacle. Near the bottom of the file sat a memorandum from the foundation attorney. It stated that certain assets would remain inaccessible unless both trustees appeared in person to verify their intentions and submit a formal activation plan. Without that step, the entire project would expire permanently. Charlotte leaned back in her chair. "So the clock is already running." Ethan nodded calmly. "Then we take the next step." There was no panic in his voice, only steady determination. Charlotte found that reassuring. But as Ethan closed the folder, a loose page slipped onto the floor. It had been hidden between 2 documents for decades. And when Charlotte picked it up, she realized it was addressed specifically to Robert Walker's son. Charlotte read the letter once, then twice. By the 3rd time, her hands were trembling. Ethan watched quietly from across the office, giving her the same patience he had shown since the day they met. Finally, she handed him the page. The letter came from the petitioner. His name was Thomas Grayson, and according to the letter, he had once worked alongside Daniel Bennett during the Foundation's earliest planning stages. "He claims my father abandoned the project," Charlotte said softly. "He says the Foundation was never supposed to exist after Daniel died." Ethan read the letter carefully. There were accusations, assumptions, frustration, yet something felt incomplete. "This sounds personal," he said. Charlotte nodded. "Very personal." Outside, the evening lights of Main Street flickered on. The diner across the street was filling with families finishing dinner while headlights moved slowly past the garage windows. Inside, another piece of the mystery had emerged. Thomas Grayson was not fighting over money. He was fighting over history. The next morning brought a new challenge. Harold Mercer forwarded documents connected to the upcoming hearing. Several statements submitted by Thomas suggested that Daniel Bennett had changed his mind before his death and no longer wanted the Foundation activated. If true, everything would collapse. Charlotte spent hours reviewing records, searching for proof one way or another. The pressure was beginning to show. Corporate responsibilities continued demanding attention. Board members wanted answers. Investors wanted meetings. Reporters wanted comments. Yet every time she felt overwhelmed, Ethan remained steady. During lunch, he closed the file folders and pointed toward the diner. "You need a break." Charlotte almost refused. Then she noticed Lily watching her with concern. 15 minutes later, they sat in a booth sharing sandwiches and iced tea. No foundation documents. No legal deadlines. Just conversation. Lily talked about band practice and an upcoming school event. Ethan listened the way he always did, completely present. Charlotte realized she could not remember the last time she had eaten a meal without checking email. The moment felt surprisingly healing. Back at the garage, a new discovery arrived unexpectedly. While organizing foundation correspondence, Lily found an envelope hidden inside a folder marked Administrative Records. The envelope had never been opened. Inside was a handwritten note from Daniel Bennett addressed to Thomas Grayson. Charlotte immediately recognized her father's handwriting. The room fell silent as she read. Daniel thanked Thomas for his early work and expressed regret for his illness delaying the project. Then came the sentence that changed everything. If anything happens to me, promise you will help Charlotte and Robert's family finish what we started. Ethan looked up immediately. The note directly contradicted Thomas's claims. Daniel had not abandoned the foundation. He had entrusted it to others, including Thomas himself. A new emotional shift occurred. For the first time, Charlotte felt sadness for the man challenging them. Something had happened over the years. Disappointment, hurt, misunderstanding. The conflict suddenly seemed less like greed and more like unresolved pain. Ethan saw it too. Maybe he does not need to be defeated, he said quietly. Maybe he needs to be heard. Charlotte looked at him in surprise. Most people would have prepared for a fight. Ethan was looking for understanding. It was exactly the kind of response her father would have respected. Then Harold called. His voice carried urgency. Thomas Grayson had agreed to meet before the hearing. But there was one condition. He would only speak with Ethan Walker alone. And nobody knew why. The call from Harold arrived just after 9 o'clock at night. Ethan answered while standing beside the open garage bay, the summer air carrying the distant sounds of traffic from Main Street. Charlotte watched his expression change almost immediately. Hope flickered across his face for the first time in days. Then confusion followed. Then concern. When the call ended, neither of them spoke for several seconds. Finally, Ethan lowered the phone. Someone showed up with evidence, he said quietly, but Harold would not explain it over the phone. Charlotte's pulse quickened. After weeks of searching, clues, letters, and disappointments, another answer had appeared. Yet the timing felt almost too perfect. The hearing was only days away. The foundation seemed close to collapse. And now a stranger had arrived, carrying something important enough to surprise Harold Mercer. Neither of them slept much that night. The next morning, they met Harold at his office. The elderly attorney looked more troubled than relieved. The evidence existed, but it had created a new problem. Harold slid a file across the desk. Inside was a handwritten statement from Thomas Grayson along with a recent amendment he had prepared but never filed. Charlotte read the document slowly. Her heart sank. Thomas intended to withdraw the dissolution request. Yet he also believed the foundation should be led entirely by Charlotte, not Ethan. According to the statement, Ethan lacked the financial background necessary to manage the project responsibly. The words hit harder than either expected. After everything Ethan had done, someone still looked at him and saw only a mechanic, only a struggling single father. Charlotte immediately objected. That is not who he is. The response came before she could stop herself. Images flashed through her mind. Ethan refusing money he had not earned. Ethan choosing Lily over deadlines. Ethan treating every struggling family in the foundation files with dignity and respect. Ethan helping people even when nobody was watching. None of those qualities appeared on a resume. None could be measured by financial success. Yet they were exactly the qualities her father had spent his life searching for in people. For the first time, Charlotte realized something that unsettled her. The possibility of losing Ethan from the foundation upset her more than the possibility of losing the foundation itself. Harold nodded. I know, but the document was real, and Thomas's opinion still carried weight. Ethan remained quiet. He had spent most of his life being underestimated. Yet this felt different. This threatened the dream his father had helped build. That evening, he returned home exhausted. Utility bills still waited on the kitchen counter. Lily found him sitting silently at the table. Without saying a word, she placed one of the foundation letters beside him. At the bottom was a handwritten sentence. The world changes because ordinary people decide to care. Ethan stared at the words for a long time. Then he folded the letter and stood up. For the first time all week, he knew exactly what he needed to do. What he did not know was that his decision would place everything at risk before the hearing even began. The hearing began on a gray Thursday morning, just 10 days before the foundation's activation deadline. Charlotte sat beside Ethan in the county conference room, her father's journal resting on the table in front of her. Across the room sat Thomas Grayson. Harold Mercer organized documents quietly. The atmosphere felt heavy, but not hostile. After everything they had uncovered, the conflict no longer felt like a battle between enemies. It felt like the final chapter of a long misunderstanding. Before anyone spoke, Ethan stood. "There is something I need to say first." Every eye turned toward him. He looked at Thomas, then Charlotte, then the stack of letters from struggling parents whose lives had inspired the foundation in the first place. "I do not care whose name is on the paperwork," he said calmly. "I do not care who gets credit. If this foundation helps even one parent keep food on the table or get home to their child, then it deserves to exist. If my involvement creates a problem, I will step away." The room fell silent. Charlotte felt her chest tighten. For weeks, she had watched Ethan choose responsibility over recognition, kindness over advantage, dignity over pride. Yet somehow he still surprised her. Even now, when he finally had a chance to claim something meaningful, he was willing to let it go if it protected the mission. Outside the courthouse windows, a delivery truck rolled past a grocery store across the street while ordinary people moved through their day. Inside, nobody spoke for several seconds. Then Thomas slowly stood. His eyes were wet. "That is exactly what Robert would have done," he said quietly. He reached into his briefcase and removed a worn envelope. "I have carried this for 20 years. Harold immediately recognized Daniel Bennett's handwriting. Thomas handed the letter to Charlotte. Her hands trembled as she opened it. It was the final message. The last one. The letter Daniel had entrusted to Thomas before his death. Charlotte began reading aloud. "If you are hearing these words, then I am gone. And if Ethan Walker is standing beside my daughter, then Robert was right about him." Charlotte stopped for a moment as emotion filled her voice. She continued, "I spent years building a company, but the most important investment I ever made was in people. Robert taught me that success means very little if it cannot be used to lift someone else. If Ethan has chosen to help you, trust him, not because he is perfect, not because he is wealthy. Trust him because he will always choose what is right over what is easy." Tears rolled down Charlotte's cheeks. Across the table, Thomas lowered his head. The truth was finally complete. Daniel had never hidden a fortune. He had hidden a lesson. Every clue, every letter, every mile traveled had been leading toward the same discovery. Character was the inheritance he wanted his daughter to receive. Not money. Character. Then Thomas revealed the final piece. Years earlier, when the foundation funds began shrinking, he had quietly used his own savings to preserve them. Not because he wanted control, because he was afraid of failing Daniel. Afraid of letting the dream disappear. His opposition had never been greed. It had been grief. And grief had blinded him. "I was wrong," he said. "The foundation does not need protection anymore." He looked directly at Ethan. "Because it already has the man Daniel hoped would lead it." The room became completely still. Charlotte looked at Ethan. Not the mechanic. Not the single father struggling to balance bills and responsibilities. She saw the man who refused thousands of dollars because honesty mattered. The man who kept every promise to his daughter. The man who listened before speaking. The man who treated strangers with dignity. The man her father had trusted before they ever met. For the first time, she understood everything. Weeks later, the Gratitude Foundation opened its doors. Its first grants helped single parents with emergency transportation, childcare, and housing support. Nothing flashy. Nothing designed for headlines. Just practical help delivered with respect. On opening day, families gathered outside a community center near a church parking lot filled with pickup trucks, volunteers, and children running through the summer sunshine. Charlotte stood beside Ethan watching the families arrive. She said softly, when I first walked into your garage, I thought I was meeting a mechanic. Ethan smiled. And now? Charlotte looked toward Lily, who was helping a young boy carry school supplies from a donation table. Now I think I'm at the best part of my father's legacy. Ethan lowered his eyes, humbled as always. Months later, life looked surprisingly familiar. The garage still opened before sunrise. Utility bills still arrived in the mailbox. Lily still needed rides to school and band practice. Across Main Street, the diner still served coffee to the same regular customers. Yet something had changed. Every month, another family received a second chance because one man had chosen integrity when nobody was watching. As evening settled over town, Ethan locked the garage and looked across the street at the diner lights glowing against the darkening sky. The world had not celebrated him with headlines. It had not made him rich. It had given him something better: respect, trust, purpose. And somewhere beyond the noise of success and failure, beyond profit and recognition, the quiet promise made by two fathers had finally been fulfilled through the steady character of a single dad who never stopped doing the right thing.